Good evening. I bet when you all went to bed last night, you said to yourself, I wonder if I'll get to see four handsome chaps on a Tuesday evening talking about soccer and laughing at Liverpool for losing in the FA Cup. And your wish came true. That's what you got. You got the handsome chappies of the EPL Panel show from American Scouser TV. ASTV, if you're half a cool kid. Joined by Alex, Glenn, and Io. Alex, I've got you muted right now, but how are you?
Doing great. Excellent. Well, good. Glad to be here.
Glenn with the haircut that's still freaking me out. How are you doing?
It's much better, much lighter.
I mean, it suits you, like it suits you and all that, but you just get used to seeing people a certain way.
It's like if you came on the show with like long hair, Macca, I'd feel the same.
Yeah, exactly. Or a pretty face. Io, how are you? You're muted, by the way, just so before you start talking. There you go.
Doing well.
That's good.
Doing very well.
So, no Premier League games to review the past weekend. There's one tomorrow, which is Liverpool's catch-up game, which then they lose this coming weekend. Coming up, so we're still game behind. But I think, no, we're not. We're going to catch up then. But big week in the FA Cup. So we'll talk about that today. We will talk about Big Ange, and there was a press conference there. I think it was after the game. The Spurs game, and it was as close to a manager crying in public as I ever saw. And we'll talk about Big Ange's problems, as well as our own teams as well. And then Pep Guardiola, like what's going on there? A loss tonight in the Champions League for City against Madrid. And then we'll look towards the weekend fixtures and the world-famous Tonali picks. But let's start with the FA Cup. This is the beauty of... what do you call artificial intelligence? Gave me all the scores, but none of the teams are in the right order, I don't think, in terms of who played where. But we'll just go by the scorelines anyway. Now, I picked out a couple of them. Io, we can talk about you're a Manchester United man, and Ruud van Nistelrooy is a Manchester United legend. I don't think I'd be wrong in saying that, at least a modern-day legend. And rest in peace to a genuine legend in Dennis Law. I think his funeral was today, maybe, or his memorial service. A fantastic player. Nobody could begrudge his talent, regardless of whether you're a Liverpool fan or a City fan or any other kind of fan. He was just a brilliant player. But it looked tricky, didn't it, for Manchester United in that game for a while?
It did. The first half were terrible, and Leicester was by far the better team in the first half. And it seems to be like a trend that's going on with United. Like, I remember this had happened when Southampton, the worst team in the league, came to Old Trafford. Same thing. We lost to Crystal Palace in the last Premier League game. It was, and the managers doing. I think this happens to all United managers. When they first come to Old Trafford, or after a while, depending, where they try to big brain things a lot. And like, I didn't understand the signing we got to play on the left side as the left wing back, and he played him on the right, and that was very weird to me. And it was very obvious that if he had just moved him to his strong side, the attack would look more balanced. But then he took him out, so it was one of those games where, we won the game, but most of the fans were kind of like, yeah, this is definitely going to be a terrible season. It's one of those games. That's kind of how it felt.
Alex, for United, obviously they're still finding their feet, if they even know what feet look like or shoes are at this point under Ruben Amorim. But Io makes a good point there. For somebody who came in the door with a huge hullabaloo about systems and a lot of press conferences saying to trust the system and you have to work on it, etc., etc. He seems to be tinkering around with it like he doesn't know his own way of playing. Do you think maybe already at this point there's a little bit of desperation creeping in for Ruben?
I don't know if it's desperation, or I guess you can call it what you want, but like the idea that you really do, results are expected. And so I don't know if it's desperation in the sense that Ange might be feeling desperation right now of like, we need to get some results on the board. But I wonder too if it's like this idea of they know the season isn't fully lost. I know I see their road to 41 points. We're looking for mathematical safety at this point if you're a United fan. But like with the weakness, I talked to somebody else recently, with the weakness of the mid-table, like there's the top pack, right? But the weakness that typically exists in like 3 to 7, that by this point, those teams are kind of locked in. Like we know who's going to be in and about Europe. Down to like 12th or 13th, it's still wide open. So United strings a couple results together and they're back into European competition in theory. So I think there's a little bit of that acknowledgement of, okay, if I can tinker a little bit and steal some results here, like against Fulham recently, then we can be back in this thing. We don't have to settle for resetting in 10th or 9th place. Like we can get up to 7th or 8th. We'll see if it works, but
it's a funny way for Manchester, to be thinking we could possibly get the 7th or 8th.
Objectively, that is hilarious. But yeah, it's where they're at right now.
Glenn, from the Leicester perspective, Leicester for all the teams that are non-mega rich clubs, the non-big six or whatever you want to call it these days, Leicester is obviously a dream model to follow. If the stars align, if things go right, one day you might be up there winning, challenging for the league, and possibly even doing an absolute nightmare for bookies and winning the thing at 5,000 to 1. But there's also a cautionary tale there as well, isn't there? Leicester is just a perfect example, as Leeds were back in the 2000s. That if you don't plan after that kind of success, if you're not ready for it, if you don't know how to handle it, you could very well become a yo-yo team again. Ruud van Nistelrooy, you throw the dice almost, like a last-ditch kind of attempt to try and keep them in the league. It's not really working out, is it?
No, and I'm pretty sure they were higher placed before he arrived, right under Steve Cooper. It's just a bit weird. You contrast this performance, which as we've just said was really decent, and they didn't deserve to lose, certainly in the manner in which they did. If they'd lost in extra time, fair enough, on penalties, that's the way it goes. But to lose to an offside goal is frustrating. Good to see Bobby De Cordova-Reid get a goal. Saw him play loads at Bristol City. Really, really great to see him still in the Premier League. It is strange, isn't it? I mean, they had that moment. I do feel the fans have been, quite entitled since that win. I think their expectations haven't necessarily met the investment, as David's just put in there. There's definitely been a gap between expectations and investment. Similar almost to West Ham, there's huge expectations there, and it just doesn't match what they're able to provide off the field, right? But it's just interesting to contrast this performance, very solid in the FA Cup, really strong, away from home, right? Against, regardless of circumstances, a tough place to go and get a result. Contrast this with the Everton game. I watched 90 minutes of the Everton match. I watched the whole game, and they were awful. And 4-0 flattered them. Yeah. It really could have been many, many more, and that wouldn't have been exaggerated. The fourth goal in that game was so laughably simple, just kind of kicked through the middle, and the centre-back gets his goal. But they're very inconsistent, right, under Ruud. There seemed to be a lack of just they can put in a performance like this for 90 minutes, or they can put in the other one. They do feel a little Jekyll and Hyde, which is tough. They have a squad with a sprinkling of quality. I wouldn't say it's a brilliant squad. I'd say it's a squad I could see in getting relegated. But, they've got decent fullbacks. They've got forwards who can kind of do something. That midfield, to me, looks a little bit lightweight. But we'll just have to see how they go. They're still my tip to go down. I think Ruud was a naive appointment, and I don't think it matched where they were at in terms of squad. And as I said, I think before on the show, you managed Man United for a couple of weeks again against Leicester twice, right? And you think you're going to do all these brilliant things, even with a misfiring Man United squad. Even misfiring in this FA Cup tie, it's significantly more talent than you've got at Leicester. So pressure's on him. We will see. I mean, looking at the table, they're in the bottom three. The bottom three is the three that came up last season. I think that's the way it will remain come May. But, they can do it. I wouldn't be surprised if Leicester City stay up. I just don't think they will at the minute.
I know somebody who felt a little Jekyll and Hyde once. They did 10 years, if anybody's interested. Jokes aside, let's laugh at Liverpool, because I know you're all eager to, and especially Io. Here's my question. I don't tend to engage in soccer fan forums, and I stay off Twitter as much as I possibly can, except to get team sheet news. It's still the best place on the planet to get team sheet news before everybody else. But what I did notice on the Manchester United one, the cafe thingy, a lot of mocking of Liverpool fans with the, not bothered, like Liverpool fans aren't bothered. But the truth of the matter is, we really weren't bothered simply because we played the kids from Degrassi Street for 80 minutes of the game. Disappointed that the three forwards that we did have didn't muster. I think the goalkeeper got more shots on goal than at least one of the forwards. But for clubs like United and for Liverpool and for Chelsea and for City, sometimes you have to sacrifice one thing in order to succeed in other things, don't you? You can't. The quad was great for City, but City could put 3 teams out and probably win all of those competitions individually. But in fact, no other club is like City apart from Chelsea. For everybody else, sometimes you have to make a bit of a sacrifice, don't you?
Yeah, I agree for sure. I mean, even though I think you're making excuses here a little bit, but
I get paid to do it.
But yes, I totally agree. I mean, he has to rotate. I think the big one is tomorrow, right? That's he has to win that game. He knows if he wins that game, it's one hand on the title. So it's he has to sacrifice for that game. I think that's why. I was surprised though he didn't have like some of the big guns on the bench. I thought he would have done that, like 3 or 4, like Salah, just leave them on the bench. Just okay, I need to go. I throw them on. I was surprised, but I also understand that I've read articles in the past that injuries is not just about playing. It's even sometimes about like instead of giving the player total rest, when you make them travel through different weather, it could lead to muscle injury. So I understand that that's possibly why they did that and left everybody back. But yeah, I think it will only matter if Liverpool go ahead and win the league and like make a deep run in the Champions League. If they don't win any of the two, then this looks like a disaster.
I mean, it does. If it doesn't work out tomorrow night, if Everton happen, in fact, essentially he's made the rod for his own back, hasn't he? He has to beat Everton. Yeah. No other result is going to justify who he played against Plymouth Argyle, does it?
Correct. Yeah, he has to. That's a must win. Everton's a must win, and he has to have a deeper run in the Champions League. I think at the very least, Liverpool have to make the semi-finals in Champions League. That's the kind of pressure he's put himself, I think.
Alex, because I'm going to get to Glenn because they got beaten by Plymouth Argyle as well, so we have a shared pain. But here's what I want to ask you as an American. I say this on the Liverpool-based podcasts on the channel a lot, and I say this to any soccer fan that I talk to who grew up in America. But to me, coming from that side of the world, even though I'm Irish, the FA Cup is a special competition. If you grew up in that part of the world, like the BBC especially, they were very good at like the entire FA Cup day is just taken up with FA Cup related programming. Other sport exists on that day in regards to what's happening. So that whole magic of the cup thing really makes sense. But as an American soccer fan, seeing a club like Plymouth Argyle, even I know they're bottom of the championship, they're still bottom of the championship, and for some reason employed Wayne Rooney as the manager for a while. But I mean, this really does emphasize something that, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't happen an awful lot in American sports. The underdog is the underdog generally and is expected to be beaten, whereas the FA Cup is like, we don't care. This is our chance to be famous for 90 seconds. We're going to beat Liverpool, or we're going to beat United, or we're going to beat Chelsea, and we will never have to buy a pint of beer in our town ever again. It really is. That's the magic of the competition, isn't it?
Yeah. I just listened to a podcast yesterday talking about the NFL and the business of the NFL. And the whole point in the NFL is that any given team can win on any given Sunday, right? And they mentioned a couple other leagues in the world, and they were talking, this is the best way to do it. And I'm like, someone should let the Premier League know that that's the best way to do it, because that's the opposite here, where the big boys have all the money. And that is what makes an upset like this so special, is that it really doesn't happen that often. I feel like we can point to every other year, it feels like there's an upset like this. But this is a really big one. I was going to ask you, Mecca, was the lineup, did they need to rotate that much? Like, I looked at the lineup, I knew some of the names, I didn't recognize a ton of folks, and I know we have to rotate for the midweek game here and then the Champions League, but was that level of rotation enough? Or if they don't win tomorrow, they don't advance far in the Champions League, will fans look back and say, we probably could have put out a little bit of a stronger 11 there, still rotated, and not lost this match? Because it is, for Liverpool, for Fulham, it'd be embarrassing to lose this. But for the team that's at the top of the Premier League flying high, to lose to the team rock bottom is not good. And even with rotation, you think there'd be enough of quality. So that's my reverse question is, yes, it's popular here. And I think American fans love the idea of an upset, but I don't think American fans quite realize like what an upset that was. We're like, oh, a plucky other team. I've never heard of them. They beat Liverpool. Cool. Without realizing it.
There's players on that team that we didn't even know. Like the kid that came on, he was dreadful at the right back. But my thinking as a Liverpool fan is that maybe, do you know that the perception we sometimes have of the Continental Cups being like they don't really care about them as much as like the British teams care about the FA Cup or the League Cup. So maybe like a bit of Arnie Slot not realizing how important the FA Cup can be. Which is why he has to now win things, because if he doesn't, it's gonna fly back in it. Like the first hiccup next season that happens is it's gonna be thrown back in his face. Yeah. But yeah, that we were all thinking like what you could have put Salah and Van Dijk on the bench. I never had to use them. Yeah. But it was either somebody. It felt like he either underestimated Plymouth Argyle and expected to win because it was Plymouth Argyle. Or he overestimated the need to rotate in that game because, they were good for their win, Plymouth Argyle. Sure. But it's still Plymouth Argyle, and I think I listened on Sirius XFM today. I think it was Rodney Marsh on that grumpy old pundit show said they conceded like 63 goals or something like that, and we only managed like 3 shots or 2 shots on target, which is embarrassing for Jota, Diaz, and Nunes. And Harvey Elliott, who was dreadful in the game.
Actually, they ran out of town, Harvey Elliott. Yeah,
it was just a bad game overall. Yeah. But there was the kid that came on for right back after Joe Gomez went off injured early on. It was like, who is that? Is he the mascot? Yeah. It was just a complete non-entity. Sazi said we avoided a tough away game at the empty hand next round, brought ourselves a week's break. Not hard to disagree, but I don't think the universe works like that. I think like randomness takes hold after that. If we win the league, no one will care about the result, which is true. But there's a Liverpool fan there. Jota, Nunes, Diaz, Elliott, and Chiesa were terrible. Chiesa, I don't like Italian players at Liverpool. They're made of glass and they never walk out. But Glenn, shared pain now from Brentford and Liverpool with Plymouth Argyle. They do have a plan. They operate that plan quite well. Is this a case that they're putting all their eggs in that FA Cup basket almost to have some sort of hope in each successive month or so for something to play for? Because it looks like they're probably going to get relegated to League One. So when you're in situations like that, you probably want to have some positive memories of the season, don't you?
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the value of the FA Cup in England, because like my favorite memories as a Brentford fan are all FA Cup memories, right? Drawing with Southampton, coming from 2-0 down to draw 2-2 when they're in the Premier League. We're in League One. That was amazing. Beating Sunderland when they're in the Prem. We were in League One. Probably my favorite Brentford memory is that. Drawing with Chelsea at home and then going to Stamford Bridge away when we were not in the Premier League. That was fantastic. So yeah, these are lifelong memories. And it was really funny. I watched when we lost to them a couple of weeks ago, I genuinely watched the scenes at the end with a bittersweet feeling. Like I was really disappointed with the team we put out and the performance we put in, similarly to you guys, because like some of our senior players were really weak as well. So I feel very similar to the kind of, rhetoric that Serzi has in the chat. But also I kind of felt this almost like borrowed elation from the away fans. So like see them bouncing in the G-Tech and to see how much that meant for the Plymouth fans, how much more significant this win was for them than it would have been for us was huge. And like I empathetically, I was like, that reminded me of being in that away end. I was part jealous, part like good for you guys. And, we didn't deserve anything with the game. And from what I've read about the Liverpool game, you guys just didn't show up. And it was you were arrogant in the bench, if nothing else. I see the rotation for the starting 11. And I do appreciate that A, there's enough quality on that starting 11 to win. B, yeah, it's an okay time to give like a younger youth player a go. And again, that front 5, 6, like there's enough talent there to beat a team in the Premier League, let alone the Championship. But there seemed to be a bit of a lack of a plan B. Like, what if this doesn't work? Okay, we might need Gakpo. We would like to save Salah, but maybe we need 15 minutes of him because he would have given those Plymouth defenders something different to think about right at the end. So yeah, and you look at how they're doing the Championship, it's pretty bleak. Obviously, it just didn't work under Rooney, unfortunately for them. And
But fortunately for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are the memories that will stay with you. I mean, I would think like obviously they're going to do their best. I would look at this as like a springboard, right? You're doing well. It's quite funny. They've beaten as many more Premier League teams than they have Championship teams this year, right? So it's quite funny. But I would look at this as a springboard for Plymouth to say, okay, we can do this. Well, we can beat Bristol City, for example, whenever we next play them, right? A springboard. And, you know, from Liverpool's perspective, like, I think there's a little bit of coping from Cersei in the chat there, you know, avoided a tough game, week's rest. That's like loser talk. I mean, guys, you quadruples on, go win every game you can. Oh, we need a week's rest. Give me a break. That team should have won anyway, right? So I'm not really standing for that, although I do think he has got some very fair points in there. But if you're, you know, cheering a week off, you know, if you have the momentum that you guys have got under Slot, ride that all the way to the end of the season and have a break then. Cancel your preseason tour of Thailand and ride this team as far as you can. I get it. I will say I'm not being a hypocrite because I was so disappointed when Brentford put out weaker teams in both cups. And I've said this on the show. I thought that was the wrong decision. And I get you guys are battling on multiple fronts, but like, go beat Plymouth. Go get in the next round. Go beat City at the Etihad. Rub it in their face. That's what you guys should be thinking. Not, oh, it's nice to have a week off. Missed out on a hard game. You should be the hard game.
Well, and that's onto that point. A lot of the mid-table clubs that are left in a lower stature, quote-unquote, clubs that are left in there are going, all right, Liverpool's out. Like,
truly,
Chelsea, this like, we've got a chance here. Fulham fans are gearing up of like, we got a real tough one against at Old Trafford, but this is you can get to the quarters again. This is awesome. Yeah.
So with that, let's then talk about the Fulham game. Was it 2-1 against Wigan? The AI got that correct.
Yeah.
But like, talk me through that game, because that's almost an old school championship game.
What a lot of the Fulham podcast, a lot of the Fulham talk was about like how right this match felt and how like this classic, a lot of championship battles, a lot of like early Barclays Prem battles. This kind of felt, so a lot of the fans were like genuinely excited for this match. I think it was a relatively comfortable win. I think went up with a nice, relatively early goal from Muniz, and then just an absolute rocket from, I can't remember who for Wigan scored it, but just he picked it up 30 yards out and put it top corner. So literally nothing you can do it in the bar where you're sat there like, okay, well, good goal. But then the quality shone through. Fulham pulled it out. I think Fulham's squad was rotated as much as Fulham squad can be rotated. I'm hearing all these different rotation patterns, and I'm like, Fulham have about 15 guys that I would trust to actually play a minute in the Prem or in a competition like this. So we rotated as much as possible, and I think from here on out it'll be full strength 11, Bernd Leno in goal, and full strength 11 for especially United. But from there on out, there are a couple performances where you look at it and go, okay, that was not great, but it worked. Relatively comfortable win. Never felt that worried about it. Even at 1-1, it was kind of like, if they don't win this, it'll be 100% their fault, and they very likely will come back and get a goal, and they did. So,
was there any sense of, you know, like at the end of the game, like, you know, leaving Wigan behind? You know, we're going back up to the Premier League now.
Honestly, a little. I mean, maybe a little, but I think there's a weird like camaraderie there, because again, there's so many battles in the championship, in the Prem, where it was like, this feels like home. This feels good to fight these guys again. I hope they come back up. There's also Steven and Ryan Sessegnon were both on the pitch. I don't know if Ryan played. I can't remember if they were both on the pitch at the same time, but they played for Wigan and Fulham, and Anthony Robinson was bought from Wigan, so it was kind of fun to have a little bit of I think they got him for 1.2 million, and they'll probably sell him this summer for 30 or 40. So good bit of business there. Hopefully more. He's worth about 150 million, but I'm kidding. But
speaking of which, Brighton beating Chelsea. We'll get to this Villa Spurs game next, but Brighton beating Chelsea. You know, there was at one point a huge amount of hope among Chelsea fans that Maresca had finally hit on the formula now with all the players, but it's kind of hit a rocky, bumpy road. But Chelsea are almost the model, aren't they, for the good ways you can go about replacing managers and keeping dynasties going, and the bad way you can go about replacing managers. It's almost a cautionary tale for Man United, isn't it? You guys have been now since 2013 looking for that next league title, and us Liverpool fans know how long that wait can go, and you Man United fans know as well. It was 27 years for the Premier League, but it really does show the swings and roundabouts of domination in a professional league, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I think Chelsea, did the thing where Chelsea were able to pull a lot of things out of the bag. And when I say that, like they got they did a lot of financial engineering where they found all the loopholes in PSSR. They did all of those maneuvering. Long ago, they started the whole loan army thing and were making so much money from that. So Chelsea has done a lot of things where it's like they don't want to take their medicine, for lack of a better word, in the sense that they don't want to go through a painful rebuild. They just want to go from winning to winning and skip the rebuild part. And I think that's what they try to do with this, like buying a whole bunch of players in the last 2-3 years. The first batch of people, the Koulibalys, Aubameyang, they were able to find loopholes again and push them out to Saudi or whatever. And they were able to turn that around and buy a whole bunch of young players now. And they had a season and a half that they were terrible. And they've been kind of good this season for the most part. But I also think, Maresca rode the wave of the fact that they had a good run. And I always told people that I would see the true metal of Maresca when Chelsea hits a bad form. When people figure out Chelsea, when people start, analysts start watching tape, start seeing where the loopholes are in Chelsea's system, I'll see. That's when I'll know how good Maresca is. And so far, I think he's just, he's what they got. He's a decent guy. I don't think he's a great manager. I think he's a decent manager, but he has a lot of talent, right? But when I say they have a lot of talent, I'm going to use that loosely. I think a lot of what they do is hugely dependent on two players, in my opinion, and that's Caicedo and, of course, Cole Palmer. I think once Chelsea go the way those two players go, and if any of them gets hurt or a bad run of form that like Cole Palmer has been on, Chelsea died. That's pretty much Chelsea.
Let's move on to the Spurs Villa game, Glenn. Here's what I want. I mean, it's just a shame the Spurs and the Villa lads aren't here tonight. We could have had a good. We could have just put them two on screen together and have them fight it out. But here's what I want to talk about Villa, because we will talk about Spurs and Big Edge as a topic in itself. But Villa, I think we've discussed here before, definitely on the Thursday pod, about Unai Emery's his tactical acumen. He's a very good tactical coach. But in bringing Rashford in, and I think one or two others, I can't remember the names now because I'm dog tired on 2 hours sleep.
Marlon Asensio.
But players that are almost like second chance players. It's almost like he's doing that Brian Clough thing from the 70s and 80s, where he would take players that were problems elsewhere. Sam Allardyce did the same thing at Bolton. Just take players that were having problems elsewhere and forging them into a team. That kind of, getting relative bargains at this point with that tactical acumen, it bodes well for Aston Villa, doesn't it? And Shea.
Yeah. Well, they're exciting signings. So I'm glad you came to me, because this is, I think, the only FA Cup game I saw this weekend, like just the last 70 minutes. I turned on too late for the first goal, which was irritating, but I caught most of the game. And it was a proper FA Cup tie. The reason I wanted to tune in is because I thought both teams want to win it. Obviously, Spurs got humbled at your place in the week. That was a really insipid performance, right? I watched that as well, and they were nowhere near your levels. Just really sad to see. And then they go into this game, right? And is telling us is a kind of almost like defensive maneuvering at this point, because he's running out of ground to stand on in terms of results. He's like, it feels like almost tongue in cheek, but I feel like he has to say, I win trophies second season, just to kind of offer some sort of guarantee. And this is one of those trophies, right? And unfortunately for him, he's crashed out of another one in the span of a week. And I love the new signings for Villa coming off the bench. I mean, seeing Morgan Rogers link up with Asensio. I mean, man, that 1-2 they played, I really wish Rogers had scored, because that would have been one of the goals of the round. There were some brilliant goals this FA Cup round, but that would have been up there. Great to see Rashford coming on and looking pretty hungry, looked pretty direct. I don't know if you saw that 20 minutes, but I'd be really curious to see what you thought of that and maybe how that corresponded to when he's played most recently for United, which obviously isn't very recently. Villa looked everything Spurs didn't, which was like full of energy and, direct and exciting. And it was kind of game over, right? I know Spurs tried to get a goal, but it really was game over right until the death when they did nab one, when their new signing did come through with a goal. Good finish from Tell as well, from a really good cross. For me, it was just a really good FA Cup game. It was end to end. Both teams wanted to win it. There was obviously pressure on Spurs. Challenging place to go. Brentford never get a result at Villa Park. And yeah, it was great. It was really exciting for them to put this kind of dream team they've pulled together from loans and stuff. Some really random signings that are really exciting, kind of like FIFA signings you'd get in a game. And to see them like materialize in real life on the pitch, playing 1-2s, taking on players. Like, it was a really thrilling second half. And Villa deserved it. Spurs look tired, right? This is their biggest thing. They have so many injuries, and like the experienced players are being run into the ground. I get that. But, Kulusevski, Son, Bentancur, they didn't look great and they didn't really do much. That's because they're tired, right? And I get it. But yeah, Ange is just going to have to lean on the injuries excuse with some justification. But he hasn't really got anything else to show for it right now. And like, the squad looks threadbare. It looks sad. I mean, it just looks like a shadow of a team right now. Whenever you see Spurs, unless they play us, in which case, yeah, it's Spurs are winning again. But every other 90 minutes I've watched of them the last couple of weeks is like, yeah, they've been a shadow team. And that performance at Anfield was pitiful. It was just like, it wasn't like a semi-final, was it? It was awful.
No, it was threadbare as Big Ange's hair. Alex, we've talked about this before for Fulham. A manager with a plan and a vision and the support of the board is a manager that can achieve great things with a club. You see that at Fulham. I've sung Fulham's praises, and of course with Brentford. Sorry again, don't hit me through the screen. With Brentford with Thomas Frank, but Unai Emery seems almost made for Villa, doesn't he? I mean, the Arsenal experiment didn't work for him, but Villa aren't complaining, are they?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to follow him from. I follow Villarreal in the Liga, and it's interesting to follow him from there, just on the trajectory of a club like Villarreal, which are essentially kind of a passion project of a local multi-millionaire. And he took this club that didn't have no success, but wasn't a big boy, and brought them into Europe, and then won the Europa League with them, right? And so it's kind of interesting to see that progression from Emery to a club like Villa, who has a really strong, storied past in Europe and domestically. Who had been relegated, came back up, and to see him again. We keep muting each other. Here we go. With significantly more money at Villa than he ever would have had at Villarreal, and to see him, what is happening now, what he's doing. I think you mentioned him being such a tactical manager, and I think that is one of the reasons that you see him in cup competitions recently do so well, is that can often be a defining thing. Is like, you have either some short rest, rotated squads, and so a difference in the match can be how they're set up, how he wants them to play. And he's a player's manager. Like, players want to play for him, and when he tells you to run through a wall or to set up in this formation and do it, players do it. And it's this, you see that when it comes to cup competitions, when it comes to the Europa League, when it comes to FA Cup, he shows out.
How does it feel for you as a Manchester United fan to see? I mean, I know it's only been like, whatever amount of minutes he got the other day, but Rashford actually looked happy, which is scary. Does that speak to the total breakdown of his relationship with Erik ten Hag for a start, and then probably carried over with Ruben Amorim? Because I get the feeling that those two managers were essentially hard asses, like trying to lay down the law and show who was boss. Whereas Emery, as Alex says, he's a player's manager, probably just says, just go out and do the thing you're good at. Let me worry about the rest.
Correct. And I, first of all, I was very happy for Rashford. I'm one of the few. Okay, maybe I'm among my circle. Let me specify, so I don't speak for the whole United fan base. Among my circle, I'm one of the few United fans who wants Rashford to do well, be happy, and who is more on Rashford's side, of course. Not saying Rashford had faults in some of the breakdown relationship. I do think a lot of it still falls on United. So I was happy for Rashford. Let me not make it about it. I was happy for him to see him play football again. I hope he finds joy with United, and I think he will do well. I hope they make the loan permanent end the season, and he just goes and finds joy. Yeah. On the other side of things, regarding what you said about managers, I always say this a lot to a couple of my friends. When we talk about this, like, a lot of these managers sometimes who come from smaller teams usually come with this high school principle, lay down the law, my way or the highway, and they try to transfer that into a bigger club. It's not going to work. I've said it many times. It's never going to work when you do that. The only times things like that can work is if from the jump, which when you come in, your team is winning straight away. Like what happened under Mourinho back in the days under Chelsea. We tried it at Madrid. They got him out of there. It's like that idea of my way or the highway thing. It doesn't work. And it doesn't mean like the squad is not going to have discipline. Same thing with Ancelotti. That's why he's a player's manager. So when all these managers try this thing, which is one of my yellow flags, I will call it for now, that I have with Ruben Amorim, it's like this whole approach of trying to do my way or the highway, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. I've never believed in it. In modern day football, it's not going to work. It works in small teams. It's not going to work in a big team. It's not.
Yeah. Let's flip it to the other side because, as Glenn pointed out, this chap is feeling the pressure. There he is eating his own tongue to add to his carb content. But Glenn, you mentioned it. I think it would be unfair to not accept the injury crisis as being a huge story behind the results of Spurs under Ange, certainly this season. But at the same time, do you think he also bears a large amount of responsibility for it because he's also in charge of not just the tactics and the playing style, but he's also in charge of the training load that goes with it week to week. So if you're training for high intensity and then playing high intensity and not giving players a break, they are going to break down, aren't they? I mean, you want to feel sorry for him because he seems like, such a great bloke, mate. But he's also surely the agent of his own misfortune if he's not willing to adapt the playing style to suit the physical needs of the players he has.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And as I said, the Brentford result, they did change things up and it was effective. And he did have to sacrifice some of his kind of more aesthetic principles, right? And you just can't play super aggressive football if you don't have the players to do it. And we know those quick tool centre-backs are completely key to the way he plays. And the fact, Van der Ven and co have been out for so long, just adapt your tactics a bit. I just think you get some managers, Amorim at the minute, maybe leaning into this camp, but you get a couple of managers who are so dogmatic, like to their own disservice, right? It doesn't help your position if you keep losing matches. You actually pile the pressure on yourself. And then if you refuse to change, even when this pressure's on you, you just don't look flexible at all. You just look stuck. You don't look like a manager who can adapt. You look frozen. And I think he has looked frozen at times. His demeanor's changed. I get it. I mean, if you talk about the centre back, sure, Dom Solanke being injured is like huge to the way he wants this system to play now. That's a huge signing for them. Right or wrong with the money, say what you will, but he's a player that Ange clearly trusted, had no injury concerns, I think nearly in his entire career. And then he goes to Spurs, which honestly, Mac, it kind of speaks to what you're saying, which is, a very high intensity style on the field and off it on the training field. And it does, from the evidence we have, it does seem like they've got a unusually high amount of injuries. Look as he says. So yeah, it's tricky. I think he does. It's bad luck, but I don't think he's helped himself. That has been my key criticism of Ange this season. I do feel he's dug his heels in when he didn't necessarily have to as much. He could have just bitten the bullet and said, hey, temporarily, we're playing a slightly more compact style, right? Maybe we'll go on the break a bit more instead of this hyper aggressive high line. And maybe there'd be 3, 4, 5 places higher on the table, less stress on him, right? And then when the players come back in, Van der Ven's back, Solanke's back, start blowing teams away again as best you can. I do want to address, Sparky Parky's accused me of being a closet Villa fan. I mean, hey, I'll just say that I was a fan of their transfer business in January. That's what I was an authentic fan of. And as an England fan, I'd love to see Rashford and Morgan Rogers linking up. That sounds really exciting to me.
So what you're really saying is that you have a season ticket for next year, right?
And Mac, if I can contrast what Glenn said about digging your heels in and being stubborn, I think we talk about Marco Silva sometimes in that light, where we're go, we're attack. And it has been Fulham sometimes where they could have seen out a draw, or they could have just kind of been a little bit more compact against a club like United, and they give up a backbreaking goal late, and you're sitting there going, what the heck? But there was a stretch this season where Fulham went 5 at the back. There were 3 or 4 matches in a row where Fulham truly had 3 center backs of Calvin Bassey, Joachim Anderson, and Issa Diop back there. and then they let Anthony Robinson get way, way, way up. And it worked a little bit, and then it stopped working, so they stopped doing it. And so there is that sense of like, if injuries force it, and that was Lukic was out, Sander Berger was out, so it was kind of like, we need to just do this. And if injuries force it, you adapt and you make it work. And that's not how he wants to play, as evidenced by we're not doing it anymore. But that's where Andrew, if you listen to the commentary, the Spurs match, they're like, what are they doing with this high line? They don't have the players to sit at the midway line, the halfway line, and just wait there with the high. What are we doing here? And yet goal after goal goes in and nothing's changing. And Glenn, to your point, it's almost like the sunk cost fallacy of he feels like if he changes it now, then it will invalidate everything and it'll make him look worse. But like at some point you need to win.
Alex, let me ask you this. On one hand, you'll have a manager who's stubborn and won't change his ideas. But then on the other hand, if you're constantly trying to adapt to the situation, you get called a tinker man and that you don't know what you're doing and the players have lost confidence in you, etc. Is there more virtue in sticking to your guns than trying to find a solution, do you think?
Yeah, and that's what I think with Marcus Silva and other managers like that is there's a way to stick to your general philosophy, even if you have to tinker around with some positioning. So like even with the 5 at the back, the philosophy was still Jedi is going to bomb down the left wing and overlap and underlap with whoever's on the left there, right? Now, that meant that without Lukic and Sander Berger kind of covering that they needed to have an extra cover at the back. So we brought the extra center back in. But that ethos was still there of like, we're going to go for it. Jedi's going to get forward. We're going after it. And so you're able to tinker without just like totally disrupting things. But you see with some of these managers, like neither of that. You just sit in it, or like you said, I think I said the tinkering from Amron, we talked about that earlier. You end up just kind of messing with stuff and it doesn't do anything. And so when you do see a manager that tries to change, it has to be a change that is, again, keeping the ethos of the team. If Marcus Silva all of a sudden went, I'm going 5 at the back, no attacking players, everything deep lying midfield, to be like, what the hell are we doing here? But the changes were around keeping the structure, keeping the philosophy. And that's where you can find success with that. You have to change. That's what Greg Berhalter fired from the U.S. Men's National Team, is he's trying to fit a bunch of square pegs in round holes. And it's like, we don't have the players for this. What are we doing? There's no ability to adapt.
Pragmatism is key. To add to that, just quickly, because I think in theory, a lot of people have like misread what pragmatism is. They made it look like defensive football, pack the balls, put players behind. Meanwhile, pragmatism is just, using the resources that you have in front of you to the best you can. That's what it is. Nobody's saying you should all of a sudden, for example, if you're an attacking possession manager, to all of a sudden sit back and start playing counterattack. Nobody's saying that. But people are saying, you have to adapt. You have to, even though I don't like the club, but that's why I always give Arteta a lot of kudos of when I see the evolution of when he joined Arsenal to now. You have to adapt to the players you have and gradually, evolve.
Let me ask you this. Just moving off the field now for a second. There was a lot of camera shots at Daniel Levy during that game and the previous game before that, to be honest. I think Conte called him out brilliantly that time in that press conference about the culture around Spurs of being a culture of not winning. They had your former manager, Jose Mourinho, and fired him before a final, which was probably the stupidest thing any club has ever done for a manager who just picks up trophies like my Roomba picks up cat snacks from the kitchen floor. But for a Man United fan, is there a cautionary tale for you of ownership that's more concerned with the bottom line than with glory, especially for a club like Manchester United, where that song is, it's not a random song, glory, Man United. That's what the game has always been about for that club.
Yeah. So with Ineos, right, to answer your question, I think Ineos and Spurs are slightly different in the sense that I think Daniel Levy is genuinely concerned just with bottom line. Like, they rent out their stadium, they want to do all those NFL games and, and gradually, sell players or buy cheap, go to championship. Like, the model is slightly different. With Ineos, the reason why they are concerned with the bottom line is they have to be concerned with bottom line, right? The Glazers have run the club terribly for the last, 20 years, bad decision after bad decision for so long, and that was covered by Fergie's genius. Fergie retired and, chickens have come home to roost now. So it's different. It's like Ineos have to be concerned with bottom line. I don't like their approach and their PR. Like they're pretty much like catfish, in my opinion. They catfish the whole fan base. Kane said all the right things. We're gonna bring, executive, the best in class, all of that buzzwords, and in the end, they're just repeating the same way. The same model is the way they're running Manchester United. It's the same model they're doing. They're just buying younger players, but it's the same model, which you hire a manager and let the manager dictate what players and what direction we go. And then if that doesn't work, you bring the next one, and then you pull down what was built before. It's the same thing. But just say, a lot of United fans think, oh, Ineos just care about the money. I wish that was the footballer business don't make that much money. I think a lot of people don't know that. You lose money in football. There's no money in football. Like the problem is Ineos have. I'm not defending them. I'm just saying they have to be concerned bottom line. Where we are now financially, we owe a lot of money to like outside transfers, so they have to cut costs.
And when you're cutting costs, the first thing you always want to do is get rid of the tea lady. Here's what I want to jump. We go to Glenn. I will just go quickly through this because I want to jump onto the other end of the manager spectrum. Pep Guardiola, Glenn, losing today. Only the first leg, but still a home game to Real Madrid in the Champions League knockout round. That man is really suffering, isn't he? In terms of the public perception. I think Pep Guardiola is one of the best coaches of all time in terms of playing style, in terms of imprinting his ideas on the public consciousness. And as I say time and again, for somebody who was involved in coaching at the time, when he came along, he literally revolutionized every youth coach's philosophy towards developing young players to the better, I think, for young players. But in terms of success and trophies won, the injury crisis and the bad transfer decisions or the non-transfer decisions, it's quite clearly to me, let's see if any of you guys agree with me, but Glenn, it's quite clear to me that in terms of trophy winning, he's as much of a checkbook manager as anybody else has ever been. If you don't buy the players, you're not going to win unless they're already there for you. You can't, if you could develop championship winning talent, there'd be no transfer fees, would there?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, yeah, their recruitment has been poor, right? That's kind of the crux of it to me is they've still spent money, but they actually haven't spent it very well. I think this season for City is just a bit of a wash, really. I don't see them going to the Bernabeu and winning. They could. They have the talent to. I don't really see it happening. Obviously not going to win the Premier League. I thought there was glimmers of a renaissance, but it's not to be. You look at their recent results, right? So disappointing, right? Tonight, they've been on the end of some really crushing morale-wise, results, like losing last minute, throwing away a lead last 10 minutes of the game. Dreadful. They squeaked past Leyton Orient. They made hard work of that. The way they performed in the second half, we did the live watch along for that game on here against Arsenal, conceding 5 to who were still your title rivals at that point, just about. PSG blew them away, as well. Like they've been on the end of some really demoralizing, depressing results. And what are the good results? Beating Salford 8-0 and Ipswich, a championship team, 6-0. I mean, they really haven't proven anything the last couple of weeks. And I think this season is just a bit of a wash. Could win the FA Cup, right? Wouldn't be a complete failure if they do win that. A lot of value in that trophy. But I think, you kind of got to the point of it. Checkbook, yes, but that money still has to be spent well. And this team is the consequence of, money being spent really poorly. The fans calling for him to go or whatever, or a vocal minority. I mean,
well, aren't all Manchester City fans a minority?
Yeah,
like 12 of them.
Of a minority. Yeah, 2 out of 12, exactly. But I think it's fair to say similar-ish to the start of the Amorim project over in the other half of Manchester. This season's a wash for you two teams. Like just get to the end of it, move on, start fresh next season under both of the same managers and really see what you can deliver without excuses after another transfer window to stabilize and demonstrate, younger talent and updated systems over on the red side. And let's just see. But this result just epitomized their season, didn't it? Like actual highs, like real moments of like, okay, we're back. The classic, no, it's so over again. Like that, this game was that like totally embodied. And I was shocked when I saw that I was out today and couldn't watch it, but I was shocked when Bellingham put in that like late goal. Like I was like, seriously, because if you were writing this, knowing what had come up until this point of the season, you would say throw away the lead, Bellingham winning, and that's exactly what happened.
It's odd to talk about two teams having a wash of a season coming from a city that's essentially rain for 360 days a year. Alex, here's my question. For City, is it as simple as Rodri being injured? Or is that too reductive?
It can't be. Yeah, it can't be that. I mean, obviously, yeah. We talk about Spurs injuries, and yeah, definitely Rodri being out has a lot to do with that, but it can't be. I think I was listening to something else recently, and talking about how in basketball, right? We were talking on this podcast a few weeks ago. Basketball, right? There are 5 guys on the court, and so one injury or one bad night or one whatever does make a big difference, right? If you're missing Steph Curry, prime peak Steph Curry, 2016 Steph Curry, that's a problem for the Warriors. But there are 11 guys on that pitch. There are 10 outfield players out there. And I think we're seeing right now especially with Haaland, like you think everybody else could be there. And if Haaland isn't getting the service, that's why he's not scoring. And so one player is not going to make or break a season. And I think, yeah, that's pure copium. And I'd like a little bit of that mainlined in for whenever Fulham fail next, if it's just one player, right? So yeah, I think it's a what do you say? The difference between a reason and an excuse. It's a reason, but it cannot be the reason why City are where they are. There's no reason why they should be down this low. I think it's a failure of the summer transfer window, and I think that's why they spent humongous in January. And I think they spent more than the trailing pack combined, or the rest of they spent enormously. I think they realized we goofed in August, and we need to make up for that quick.
I was a Manchester United fan. Does the fact that City are also experiencing misery, does it give you some sort of comfort? We were just discussing before we went on air that I'm deaf, but I can't do sign language. You're muted, my friend. There you go.
Okay, sorry. It gives me a little bit of comfort, just a tiny little bit. I said we beat them in the derby, but I know they will probably be back next season, so that's why I'm not too, I'm not too like happy about it. To add to Alex's point, though, I do think City's problem is not just a failure of this transfer window. I think it's a failure of multiple transfer windows till now. I think they watched their squad age. They tried to replace their key players. And they failed in doing that, right? They brought in the guy that they got from Leeds. What's his name? Calvin Phillips. Did not work out. He failed to push Rodri or any other midfielders whatsoever. They brought in Savinho. He looks Doku. Grealish was supposed to be the new guy on the left. So I think so what now happened is they became so over-reliant on KDB, who is he's physically washed already. So reliant on Haaland. Now the young transfer that they got that was working out, they sold him I get why they sold him. They offered about £90 million for him, Alvarez, to go to Atletico Madrid. They sold him. But I think what happened to City is just a combination of multiple factors. Their key players aged. They tried to replace them and failed. And lastly, I think the Premier League has become more physical. And City caught on to that very late. And when I mean more physical, you can see every midfield you play in the Premier League, literally every midfield, there's a lot of physicality now, and that's one of the things United struggling with. There's a lot of physicality, like physically built athleticism, like so now in the Premier League, once you have a midfield that's just technical and you're not able to like very intense, you're not pressing intensely, you're not doing all those things, you're going to be far behind. And that's another thing that's happened to City. They struggle with the physical battles when you watch them.
Speaking of the Premier League, let's move ahead to see what's going on for this weekend. We'll start with you, Glenn. Brentford, West Ham away game. The West Ham area, what was his name? Lopetegui experiment didn't work out. Now they have the Graham Potter experiment. is the Graham Potter experiment going to be any match for the Thomas Frank experiment, do you think?
We'll see. I might have said this last week because obviously we haven't had any games since we spoke, but this is one of those matches where it can go either way. You play this game a handful of times and you get every single result. I would think it'll be a good watch for a game. I think, as you actually said, Maka, I think looking at it from the manager perspective, I think seeing a Potter system versus a Frank system and seeing how they utilize their squads will actually be really interesting. And I think it will be a really decent game. I think it should be attacking. I'd like to think we'll approach it in an attacking way, right? Seeing this as a team that is very beatable. Not that we should win, but that the win is a possibility, and start 4-3-3. Would like to see Wissa, Bumo, Sharda up front. Obviously, Damsgaard has been, I've said it, I've been banging this drum all season, but like he's one of the best creative players in the league. Honestly, this season, I'd put him maybe even recent form, him and Palmer are right up there at the top of the league in terms of cams. So I'm excited to see what we can do. Again, it's one of those games I would be surprised if it ends up 0-0. I can see goals. I'd say maybe 1-1 would be my prediction for this one, just because I do think they're going to be very evenly matched. And, West Ham have players that can hurt you, like Kudos, Paqueta, like they're all quality, aren't they? It's just a case of Potter having time to implement his style with a group of players he hasn't put together, right? But I will be really, really interested to see if Evan Ferguson gets a run out after being signed at the death during the transfer window. I think he's a great signing for them on loan. I think he'll score goals, and I would not be surprised I don't know if he's match fit, but he is the kind of forward who scores against Brentford, very central, bit of a poacher, very clinical. He's the guy that gets goals against us. So if he gets a good amount of time, I'd think he might be on the score sheet.
And he's Irish, so that always helps. Alex, it's a big one there for you guys. Forest are doing fantastic, absolutely brilliant, and kind of justifies the sacking of Steve Cooper and the bringing in of Santa Claus, Portuguese Santa Claus. But if you can get through this game, not only will that help anybody who's chasing for top 4 spots, but it will be a nice feather in the cap, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. I think this, like Glenn said about Brentford and West Ham, this game, I don't see a ton of different outcomes. I see 2 outcomes. I see either Fulham win like 3-2 and it's kind of crazy, or Forest romp 4-0. Like I don't know if there's a middle ground. I think there'd be a lot of goals scored. Fulham, I think, only have 3 or 4 clean sheets in the Prem this year. Forest are on a tear. Except for today. I think it was today. Their FA Cup match was a weird one. They squeaked by, but barely. I think this is one of those ones where, Fulham either is in a back and forth affair that their 4, 5, 6 goals are scored total, or Forest romps. And I don't know quite which Fulham will show up, unfortunately. I'd like to think it's the Fulham at home that, that can pull out, score a few goals, and play just well enough defensively to beat a squad like Forest. I've been saying since the beginning of the year, I think Forest are frauds. I don't think they deserve to be up there. But at some point, I think I said a couple weeks ago, you are what your record says you are. And Forest record says they're really damn good. So at some point, I'm going to have to put my haterade down and just accept that they're in the Champions League spots for a reason. So maybe if it's 4-0, I'll come back on and say that that's why they're in the Champions League side. But I don't know. This is an interesting one because, again, 3-2, 4-3, or Forest romps. So I'm curious to see what it will be.
Liverpool Everton tomorrow, but that's more of a catch-up game. Brighton Chelsea on Friday, but if we go to Sunday, Liverpool Wolves, we'll talk about that on Thursday for the Thursday pod. But Spurs and United, this is a game, really, isn't it? Both managers need a result out of this, and the result could be a powerful motivator for the rest of the season. Man United away win would be great for Amorim, but Big Ange needs a break, and if he gets one against Manchester United, it keeps the Wolves from the door for a little bit longer, doesn't it?
It does. I call it the battle of the bumps, the battle of the lower mid-table sides, the battle of the teams just outside relegation. Battle is I think definitely both managers need a result. Funny and weirdly enough, Amorim's tactics kind of works better away from home. I think he's lost more games at Old Trafford. I think he's probably lost only 1 or 2 games all season away from home. And we've lost like 5 or 6 at Old Trafford. So I would say this is one of those games that might play into his hands, into United's hands, just because I think Spurs have a lot of players out injured. If I remember, I think they have a whole lot of players still out. I don't know if they're back for the game. I'm not sure. I don't know what's that looking like. Van der Ven, Romero, Madison. They have a lot of key players still out, and I could see us trying to like be compact, sit back, because now he's not forced to like try to attack and like keep possession and do all the things that we struggle with at Old Trafford. So I can see United nicking a win, and I can see a draw. I'm not sure Spurs is going to win that game. I think it's either we win or it's a draw. I think draw is the most likely result, like a 1-1 stinker draw.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to put the fixtures back up here, but it's the Tonali's picks. Liverpool Wolves will be the Sunday game to look at, but let's look at the fixtures again. Glenn, where's your Tonali's picks there from the Saturday games, plus Wolves and Liverpool on Sunday?
So I'm going to go for a Sunday game. I think I'd be obviously really curious to see how the Derby game unfolds tomorrow. Looking forward to watching a bit of that as I work, but I am going to put some, fictional money on Wolves getting a good result. I'm curious to see if the momentum,
Sorry, I had to mute you there.
Censorship.
I'm curious. I get that. I could totally get the FA Cup being a blip, but it's sometimes those small things that can just destabilize you. And just say, you go out of the FA Cup, maybe Everton get a plucky draw tomorrow. I don't really see them winning it, but maybe they get a hard fought draw. Yeah, you just see momentum changing slightly. I think we will still win the league regardless of results in the next week or two. Really, if I did put real money on, I'd say a Wolves win, Cunha anytime scorer. I quite like the sound of that.
Alex, do you have a Tonali's pick in there at all?
Yeah, so I see Sir Z commented he thinks City beats
just bear before you even start. Bear in mind, I have my finger on the mute button.
I think you'll like this. No, I think I see Sir Z's comment about City beating Newcastle, and I agree that this is kind of one where you'd think Guardiola can rally the troops. But if I had to put money, I would say Newcastle get that result. I think after the pretty lackluster, albeit rotated squad performance against Leighton, getting beat like they did against PSG, and then coming back, 3-4 days later. That's tough. Like this is a tough mentally and emotionally. And if we've seen somebody talked about earlier, City just don't appear to have that like mental fortitude that we've seen of the Terminator running after teams in years past, where you look in the river and you see City and you're like, oh shit, here we go again. They just don't have that this year. And so this is the kind of match where a decent Newcastle United team, pretty good, is coming in. I could see that. There's no way Spurs are getting anything. Like that's 100% lock. United away from home, away from maybe some of the negativity and aura of Old Trafford. I think White Hart Lane, whatever they're calling it, is going to be a viper's den if United get a goal before Spurs do, and it's going to get ugly in there. A bad chance about Levy. It could get ugly for Spurs if they don't stay tough in the first 20, 30 minutes.
Io, do you see any other different Tonali's picks, or do you agree with the lads? Are Leicester going to do something against Arsenal, Ipswich against Villa, Brighton against Chelsea, or is it all fairly set and straight?
Brighton Chelsea is my Tonali pick. I can see Brighton doing a double because they knocked them out of the FA Cup. I can see them do a double with Chelsea, and their fan base is going to go in meltdown, and I love it. I love to see the meltdown. So yeah, I think Brighton will beat Chelsea. I just think Leicester got to do something against Arsenal. It's just because more to do with Arsenal. It could be. It's entirely wishful thinking, probably. But I think Van Nistelrooy has to get. It would be just ironic that the Man United legend with the face like a horse puts a huge dent in Arsenal's title hopes, especially if Glenn's Tonali pick works out for him.
That would be ironic. A Liverpool loss and an Arsenal loss.
That would be great.
And then Newcastle win, and that throws all the spanners into the works. But first of all, I want to say thanks, lads. Alex, Glenn, and Io for joining me today. Should be back next week. For all of you superstar legends watching us and staying with us, make sure you're following us, liking us, and subscribing on YouTube. Tap or smash that like button, depending on the quality of your keyboard. Join us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, formerly known as X, Blue Sky, Mastodon, ELO, The Beatles, and Coldplay. Whichever social media you want to go on. But we will be back next week. Thursday show will be on Thursday, Wednesday morning coffee tomorrow morning. There's a lot of football to be played, but it's nearly the end of the season. I just caught that looking at the table the other day. We're actually like 2/3 of the way through at this point. It's going to come thick and fast. What is it, 2025? We don't even have a nice tournament to look forward to in the summer. Or maybe we all need a break. Who knows?
Some of us still have the FA Cup to look forward to. So
I don't even know what you're talking about. I've never heard of that contest in my life.
Go Everton. Go Everton. Go Everton.
But yeah, we may not have a show on Thursday or any more American Scouts or TV if tomorrow's result doesn't go for us. So keep an eye out for that. But gentlemen, thank you very much. We will see you soon enough. Enjoy your weekends, especially if they help Liverpool. And for everybody else, have a peaceful night. Enjoy your Horlicks and your Ovaltine and your chocolate chip cookies before you go to bed. And just don't leave any crumbs there. That's how the bed bugs get you. Peace out, everybody. Have a good one.
Take care.